Welcome to Farm Your Daily, a field forward podcast. I'm your host, David Geiger. Today on Farm Your Daily, we look at working with sustainable practices on the farm. Mouchka with Landus joins to talk about the evolving landscape of conservation. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Your Daily. And joining me on Farm Your Daily, we're going to take a look at what's going on in the sustainability world over at Landus. Joining me right now, Mouchka. Thank you so much for your time today. Craig, you are the Director of Sustainability with Landus, and we're going to chat a little bit about that. First off, can you just describe what sustainability means to you and your work that you do?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about this. It's a area that I'm passionate about, and like you said, so I lead the sustainability efforts here at Landus, and really at a high level, when we talk about sustainability at Landus, we're really talking about something pretty simple, and that's supporting our farmer owners. Farmers have been doing smart, responsible things on their land for generations. Of course, that continues to evolve, and as technology and innovation and some of that space pushes that evolution, but our role is really to help them translate that work into new opportunities. So whether that's conservation programs, whether that's low carbon markets, whether that's partnerships with companies who value stewardship, we just focus on keeping things practical, voluntary, easy to navigate. And if it doesn't help our farmers, we typically don't lean in. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, kind of, hopefully that addresses that question, but yeah.
It does. And, I think too, there's a lot of questions to go into with that. And that would be, what are, to you, the most effective means of sustainability that you've seen over your career?
You mean at a farm level, or from a systems approach, or?
I think both. What springs to your mind when I ask that question?
Well, what springs to mind is a lot of the buzzwords, which I tend to not lean into as much, because I think, for a multitude of reasons, there is some fatigue by growers that get approached first with, hey, you should be cover cropping, or hey, you should be no-till cover cropping, grazing cattle, all of these things, and in reality, it's not always the best motion for every operation, and that could be for a multitude of reasons, right? That could be soil type or region, or on and on. So that's what first pops in the mind, and unfortunately, I think that's what first pops in the most folks' mind. But what I hope starts coming to mind more and more is just, it's really all about telling the story, documenting, proving the good stewardship that's already occurring on most operations, and leaning into the pathways that meet them where they're at. And that's really kind of a focus that we take at Landus, is meeting our growers where they're at in their journey, in their operation, and trying to find opportunities that make sense for them.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is a very common topic that I've seen in agriculture, where there's a general misunderstanding of how farms work and how diverse farms and their soil types and their landscapes can be and can look like. So as you approach that topic, you could have many practices that work extremely well for one farmer and don't work at all for another. So how do you approach that with the diverse group and the diverse farms that you work with?
Yeah, so a lot of it is navigating the space on behalf of our farmer owners, right? So part of our job is to simplify this, and it's an ever-evolving, ever-changing space. And I think there's maturity that is coming into the space, which makes sense. In time, we should see more and more maturity in some of these programs and understandings. But we do try to create a portfolio of opportunities for farmers to participate in, so that we can meet them where they're at, because some programs or some opportunities, for reasons that you just mentioned, may not make sense for one. So we don't, if we know that it doesn't probably make sense for that operation, we don't present that opportunity necessarily. But our job is to help simplify these things, sit alongside them from both a consultative standpoint, from understanding the practices, if there are things that they're already doing on the farm or additional that they would like to consider that might make one program more relevant for them. Part of our job is to help them understand what that looks like and what implication that can have on their operation, and get them plugged in where it makes sense.
I think that's really good approach to take when it comes to dealing with, as we mentioned, the specific farms. But what are the questions you then get from folks who are concerned about which way to go or what practice to experiment with or give 10 acres to?
That's an interesting question. It's a broad spectrum. So some farmers are they're wanting to know how they can do more, and do more of I would just broadly categorize that of do more of the things that they're not doing yet. So that's a kind of an exciting question, because we can talk to them about, if you're wanting to move into reduced tillage or no-till, what are the ripple effects on that, right? So what impact does that have on the inputs that you're purchasing and or applying, and timing and rates and all of those things? I would say more infrequently, it's a P&L type question, right? Like, am I going to see a return on this? I think most of them have a general idea of whether they can, just on the surface. Where we can help more on that is helping them understand what monetization pathways might exist for some of these things. So yeah, it's really a broad spectrum of questions, but generally speaking, it's around, hey, where can we participate based on what we're doing? If we're going to consider changes, how does that affect other aspects of the operation, and what do we need to do that correctly?
I think you would understand better than most about how sustainability does have extremely good benefits for folks in the future. But until that point, farmers are running a business. And so it can be difficult to justify certain costs and certain scalability of sustainable practices if there just isn't the money to do it. Right. So we have a bunch of cost shares, incentives that exist, and there's, I think, a lot of confusion that exists on what can work with what. What are some of the resources and some of the ways you talk through to farmers or support them on that financial side?
Yeah, that's a very intimate conversation, right? However, that's what we have a couple of conservation agronomists. That is where their expertise lies. They do these practices on their own operations, and it's what they look at and think about every single day. So good resources that they can walk through that exercise with, and really understand some of those implications. And again, those are going to vary, right? It's not a one size fits all, especially when you get into the financial conversation side of things. And if it's equipment that they're considering either purchasing or updating to fit a evolution or a change of a practice, that's something that they have plenty of resources to talk with us, and we may not have the perfect answer, but that collaboration is an important element of navigating that space and really understanding what opportunities do exist. And I would argue that many of our growers in Iowa are already doing things that it's good stewardship, right? Like, one of my favorite things to do in a room full of farmers, and especially if there's any downstream presence in that room, is just ask, who here feels like they're good stewards of their land. Not one hand is left unraised. And as a follow-up question, who would have any interest in understanding what they could potentially do more? Not a requirement or not a net, have to, but potential. And again, most hands stay raised to that question. So that to me is just a large indicator of like, hey, they want to do the right thing. We are already doing a lot of great things, and we got to tell that story better, document that story, which takes data, right? So the data conversation many times is, well, what are you going to do with it? In the most simplistic way that I can say it, that is just to substantiate what you're actually doing. And that substantiation allows us to then take that and open up, pathways for either incentives or monetization. And so a lot of guys are already there. They're already doing it. It's all about just finding the right programs and opportunities that fit whatever combination that they're already doing. So
I think that brings a good question then as we look forward, right? What would you like to see in the future as you approach producers, as you approach growers, and all the folks you work with on their approach and how they approach this type of sustainability, whether it's conservation or new technology or just influencing how point source sides may not be holding up their end of nutrient management, et cetera. There's a whole variety of ways to approach a more sustainable situation, especially as you mentioned downstream. Mm-hmm. So what would you like to see as we move forward?
I hope it continues, and I think this is happening to a degree, but just a continued open-mindedness, and sustainability or regenerative ag or whatever word that we want to use. I get the stigma around some of it. However, if we could set some of that stigma and past experiences aside, and just keep that open mind, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the future. And so to keep that open-minded mindset and curiosity, I think there is a lot of opportunity. So I hope that continues to evolve and expand. And like I said, I think it is more and more. And I think it's helping that even, I'm biased, but with our approach of trying to meet the farmers where they're at on their operation today, instead of showing up and talking about everything that should be done differently, like they're doing a great job. They're in business for a reason. And so, I hope that just continues to evolve. And like I said, I think we're seeing that happen, where the programs and opportunities that we've leaned into and continue to grow, and they continue to show clear demand signals from both sides of the equation. And so, yeah, I think it's already happening, but it is what I'm going to pick to hope for more of.
Craig Mouchka is the Director of Sustainability with Landus, joining us on Farm Here Daily. Craig, thank you so much for your time and the discussion today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. Really appreciate the conversation.
This is Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community, so please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.